Welcome into the Best Damn College Football Show, November 17th, Tuesday, each and every Tuesday, right here on the WagerTalk YouTube channel. We are simulcast live talking big matchups in college football for the week ahead, getting in-depth handicapping angles. Today's show, Mid-Major Matt and Rob Veno. Follow Rob on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. Robbie, welcome in. How you feeling?
I'm good today, Drew. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing good, man. Good to have you on, Robbie. And Mid-Major Matt making getting the call from the bullpen here, the flame-throwing righty. Follow him on Twitter at Mid-Major Matt. Welcome in, buddy.
I like to think more of a finesse guy. I'm not going to throw fast, but I'll mix some pitches up and go all sorts of different directions.
All right. Well, we're going to be going all different kinds of directions on this show, guys. Hopefully you like the group of five. We got Tulane at Tulsa Thursday night. We got two games we're going to be breaking down in depth. App State, Coastal Carolina in the Sun Belt, and Cincinnati UCF in the AAC for two Saturday games. And, of course, a degenerate special, which you can wait and see at the end, and best bets as well at the end. So, guys, starting off here, Thursday night, we got Tulane in Tulsa. Looks like Tulsa -6 or -6.5 point home favorites. 53.5 being the total. Mid-Major Matt, interested in your opinion here. We got Tulane short week after facing that Army option attack, chopping at their knees. I don't really like that profile, especially now having to go on the road. Tulsa, a good defensive team themselves, coming out with a big win against SMU. I think Tulsa's short here. I've already bet them personally at -5.5. We've seen it move to -6. It's even as high as 6.5 here. What are you thinking in the AAC here Thursday night?
Well, I mean, look, as a guy who had Tulsa on Saturday, I was very happy with the result, getting the 28-24 victory over SMU. And when you talk Tulsa, it's all about their defense. They've held opponents to 370 yards per game, 21.8 points per game, which is the lowest in Coach Montgomery's tenure. And they're a team that's going to, grind you out defensively. But one of the trends that I've noticed when it comes to Tulsa is they're not a good first half team. They were down 23-5 to UCF in the first half, 17-3 to ECU in the first half, 21-0 to SMU. So this is a team that starts slow. And when you've got a short week here, it's really an opportunity potentially for Tulsa to go and jump out early on these guys. This is a Tulane team that beat Army last week, as you said, and their offense is in great shape. Pratt, the quarterback, has been really good. I mean, I was a little skeptical at first, and he was, it was a little shaky at first for Pratt, but he's a guy that's really fit in. And I like Willie Fritz. I think Willie Fritz is a very good coach in this thing. And to me, when you've got a short week, I give a coaching edge. And to me, I like Willie Fritz more than I like Montgomery. So to me, I'm almost wanting to jump on Tulane a little early. Maybe a first quarter, our first half bet here, because, we've already talked about how Tulsa is a team that struggles in the first half. It's a guy, Pratt's been getting more time in the pocket. He was sacked 15 times in his first 3 starts. He's been sacked 5 times in his last 3 games. So the offensive line for Tulane's getting better. The offense is in a bit of a groove. I know Tulane's defense isn't the greatest thing, but I don't think Tulsa's offense is the greatest thing ever. I think Zach Smith is an inconsistent quarterback, and I think this is an opportunity here, at least early on, to capitalize potentially on a Tulsa team that's not very good in the first half of games.
Interesting. Okay. That's definitely true. And Tulsa kind of getting slow out the gate here. But Robbie, maybe can you break the, kind of the rubber match here? I'm kind of looking Tulsa. Looks like Mid-Major Matt might be favoring the Green Wave.
Well, I'll put numbers to what Matt was saying about Tulsa in the first half, because it's the first thing I had here as a note. Second half betting in this game. If you like Tulane, how about this? Tulane's 8-0 over the total in the second half so far this year. The second halves in Tulane games average 32.6 points. Not one single game in the second half has scored less than 27. So something to look at, guys, when halftime comes. Tulane 8-0 over the total. Now, on the other sideline, Tulsa's 4-0 against the spread in their last 4 second halves. This speaks to what Matt was saying. Here's their last 4 second halves: 22-3 over UCF. Pretty good team. 21-7 over USF, 31-13 over ECU, and 21-0 last Saturday night against SMU. So 4-0 against the spread. Big differences, guys. 19, 14, 18, 21-point margins in those 4 second halves. So you got 2 trends there, one for each team as far as second half is concerned. Let's put some numbers to Michael Pratt, the true freshman quarterback for Tulane, took over for Keon Howard, the kid from Southern Miss, just couldn't get it done. Since Pratt has become the starting quarterback for this team, He's got 56.5% completions. They throw for 197 a game. The team gets 383.8 total yards per game. So 384 total yardage wise. Those aren't earth-shattering numbers for Tulane. In a few of those games, they've been outgained and still managed to get a cover. They're 5-0 against the spread in their last 5 games. But as I mentioned, they're outgained by 59 yards per, 383 to 442. Listen, if you can do something real well offensively, whether it be run or pass, then you can do it against Tulane. The problem is, what does Tulsa do especially well? I'm not sure what they do especially well, but, the numbers would show me Tulsa in AAC games this year, 428 yards or more in every single game. So they're gaining total yards, but when you watch them, you just don't know. Some days Zach Smith is tremendous. Some days he's not. Some days the running game is great. Some days it's not. I think Tulsa can find enough holes in the Tulane defense. The key to me to the whole thing is the fact that Tulsa plays such good run defense, and Tulane is really predicated upon the run, guys. I just mentioned Michael Pratt's statistics. I mean, the pass is to kind of balance off the offense, but I'm not going to ask the true freshman to go ahead and cover this game for me, especially if Tulane has trouble running. If we use common opponents, SMU, they both played almost exactly the same. Very, very tough games within a field goal or 4 points. The UCF game is the difference. UCF beats Tulane by 17, even though Tulane gets the cover. But Tulsa beats UCF. Drew, when I look at it, you wonder what happened in that East Carolina game. It's got to be a mirage because, ECU goes out there and throws for 370 against these guys. It's the only game where the defense failed for Tulsa for 4 quarters. And they probably should have lost that game. The referees actually can be, you can shake hands with them for winning that game for ECU. I'd have to lean Tulsa, but it could be a real close game. I mean, it's nothing I'm definitive about, but I just think the defensive difference between these two is great enough. I think, guys, that it's the 4th consecutive home game for Tulsa. I don't think they've left Tulsa, Oklahoma, left that field in quite a while, even though they played a lot less games than Tulane due to the, all the coronavirus postponements that they've had.
Yeah, I mean, Tulane has more wins than Tulsa, or the same amount that Tulsa has games here. And yeah, you bring up the fact of playing straight home games. Yes, it is. Well, I got them at the second. They did go down to USF down there in Tampa on the 23rd of October, Robbie. But other than that, they have been in Tulsa.
Yeah, I mean, it's, and the field doesn't really even make a difference, Drew. We've seen in college football, visitors come in and win games because of no crowd. And I don't know that Tulsa's that great of a home venue that teams go in fear. I think if I had to, in this game, I'd probably wait till halftime and try and capitalize on one of those outstanding trends with these teams, if not both. The game to me could be very close within a field goal. The game to me, if I had to pick a team to cover, I think the team most likely to cover is Tulsa, just because they can stop what Tulane does best.
Yeah, and you're right. It is 4 straight weeks, because that would have been 4 weeks ago by the time this week comes up. So just because Tulsa has had canceled games here. But you bring up the ECU game, because that was part of my handicap last week. I was on Tulsa versus SMU for a lot of the reasons you talked about. Just the defense for Tulsa, I think, is really underrated. And I was in the sports book at Circa, kind of watching a bunch of games when that ECU game was going on. So I didn't really take it all in. I don't know if they were missing guys or what the story was. I don't know if you have anything on that matter, any closing thoughts on this game?
No, I don't. It had to just be a mirage, Drew, to tell you the truth, because they hadn't played that poorly defensively. I do know that before that game, if you read there were a lot of ECU articles available to read where they were fired up for that ball game, and it just looked like, Matt mentioned Tulsa starts slow. Looked like ECU hit them in the mouth and never stopped hitting them, and Tulsa was a bit surprised by it. So I would chalk it up to that. That was a game. From an East Carolina standpoint, I don't know that head coach Mike Houston has ever been that strong-minded about his team and their ability to go out and play a really good game that night, which they did. So I'll take it with a grain of salt. The majority of Tulsa's games reflect one thing. That ECU game reflects another. Maybe It showed up in the first half last week because SMU threw all over them for 24 points. But, boy, they straightened it out in the second half.
And any closing thoughts here, Mid-Major Matt? Anything on the total?
I mean, I think the equalizer here is the short week, and I think when you look at a game like this, I mean, you've got a Tulsa team. I mean, in theory, Tulane has quote unquote a little bit more time to prepare because they played an earlier game, and Tulsa had a later game, and their game was certainly more stressful than Tulane's game was. But as you brought up, the whole playing Army thing the next week, but also, to some of the Tulane players, they used to play that style that Army had. So it's not like they haven't gone up against it in practice. So to me, I'm looking here and I see Tulane 3.5 points in the first quarter, 10.5 points in the first half. I think if you're going to jump on Tulsa, we saw ECU put up those 17. We saw SMU put up the 21 and UCF early. So to me, once again, to capitalize, if you don't feel comfortable taking the first quarter or the first half, then isolate it. And this is what I've done more this year. I'll take Tulsa out of the equation completely and say, all right, Tulane, score over 3.5 points in the first quarter or 10.5 points at halftime, and then you don't even have to worry about the other half of it.
Good point there, Mid-Major Matt. And shout out to the chat box here, guys. A lot of people, first of all, welcome into everybody out there. Sin Choo Choo, Mid-Major Matt, always active in the chat box. We got Johnny Outlaw, Kevin Riley, Tivaroon Russell, Proud Babylonian. All you guys, welcome in, and feel free to chime in, whatever you'd like, what you're looking to bet. And some guys asking about Maction plays for tonight, tomorrow night. Well, actually, guys, we'll be right back at 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, breaking down every single game in the MAC. So you can come back and join us right here live, simulcast on the WagerTalk YouTube channel. So next game up here, guys, in the Sun Belt. Talk about two, I guess, one at least premier program. Another one that's coming up and likely, and most people power rating is a lot higher than App State. We're talking App State versus number 15 ranked Coastal Carolina, -5.5 at home, 48 being the total here, Robbie. And I'll tell you, App State quarterback knocked out. They Zach Thomas, I believe he was carted off the field. I think his status is still unknown. I'd be very surprised if he does play here, Robbie. But Coastal Carolina, they've been a monster this year, both straight up and ATS. And App State, they've been winning games, but they haven't been covering. So, of course, here we've seen money on Coastal Carolina is high. They're starting to flirt with a touchdown here, -6-point favorites off of a bye at home. That's the side I like. I'd lay it with the favorite, Robbie. What do you think?
Well, I think your first point is the key to the whole game. I mean, if Zach Thomas was playing, Drew, you'd have to lean, or I would lean App State, and simply because of the difference between the quarterbacks here. I would give the edge to Zach Thomas over Grayson McCall, a freshman who's come in and done great things. But in a big game like this, I would much rather trust Zach Thomas with that offense rather than McCall, who hasn't been in a game like this at all. Really, I mean, Coastal Carolina has just taken the country by storm, the conference by storm this season. So they've never been in a game this magnitude. But without Thomas, it's a totally different story. I mean, that guy has – I'm trying to think, other than last week and maybe some random garbage time when anybody but Zach Thomas has played quarterback for App State the last 3 years. And in practice, as we know, Zach Thomas has probably taken every snap with the ones for the past 3 years. So this is a very difficult spot for Appalachian State. If there was one guy they couldn't lose, and they had already lost Dietrich Harrington, their top running back. Now, they played without him last week, and they've got good running backs behind him. So, they might try and lean on that to help the quarterback out this week. But I can't play App State without Zach Thomas in this contest. Couple of things here real quick. In Coastal's situation, the postponement or cancellation of their game last week, whichever, I have a difficult time now keeping up with postponements or cancellations, but it gave them an extra week to prepare for this game. So that certainly is an edge to Jamie Chadwell and that Coastal Carolina bunch. Isaiah Likely, the tight end for Coastal, had been a really big play component of that offense. Then he gets hurt. And the last 3 games, 3 catches for only 17 yards. Tough to figure out where he's disappeared to, but I think he might reappear here today against App State. I'll say this, the offense that they run is an offense that Appalachian State can defend. This is probably going to be a really low-scoring game, guys. Aside from, Drew, if you like Coastal, for guys playing totals, I would probably recommend under in this contest. Appalachian State has played Chris Reynolds, right, from Charlotte. Chris Reynolds, 36.7% completions. Appalachian State has played Grant Wells from Marshall, another guy who, runs about a half a dozen to 8 times a game, 44% completions. Overall, this pass defense has been lights out. 46.3% completions allowed by this pass defense. No team that they've played so far this year has completed better than 55%. That one team was Texas State, who hit 55.3% of their passes. So, listen, Coastal's probably going nowhere through the air. They probably rely on C.J. Maribel and the quarterback to get the job done running the football. If Isaiah Likely shows up as a big play component, off play action or something, that helps Coastal as well. But I still think both of these defenses become matchup-wise, they become the best units on the field, simply because Coastal gets a backup quarterback here. And to me, I'd probably look toward under the total. I mean, I couldn't argue anybody off Coastal in this instance. They've been that good. They're that well coached. And like I say, they get the benefit of no Zach Thomas in all likelihood.
Yeah, and Robbie, they're not going to be – neither team is going to look to run tempo, so they're both going to sit on it and wind the clock here. I don't disagree with your underlook here. And mid-major Matt, what do you think in App State, Coastal Carolina?
Well, I agree there. I think that the under is worth a look here in terms of, without Zach Thomas, I'm looking up some stats and stuff on this Jacob Huseman kid, which is funny because I'm used to the other Jacob Huseman who was with Chattanooga, and I thought, oh, he transferred, but no, he's actually the tight ends coach in Chattanooga. This is a different Jacob Huseman, but at least he's been in the system. I mean, he's only thrown a couple of passes, but at least he's in the system. So I think there's some people who might be a little bit overrating. Look, Zach Thomas is the guy you want for this offense, but I trust this Appalachian State defense. Look, I think you somewhat throw out the last game because I think they were overlooking Georgia State a little bit. I know Georgia State's been really good offensively, but App State hasn't been a bad underdog. 4-0 against the spread the last 3 seasons as an underdog, 2-2 straight up. And, as Rob talked about, we all look at the Coastal offense, but their defense has held their last 3 opponents to just 20 points. And it's no slouches either. Georgia Southern and Georgia State are in that mix. And South Alabama has shown spurts of offense at times. So to me, it looks like I lean under here. The line move, I think, is about right because people are betting the name of App State. I don't think that Coastal Carolina, for as well as they've played and for as public as at least they've been this season, I think more people who are the betting public know App State. So I think they're betting name recognition alone. They're also seeing that App State won last year, 56-37, not realizing that this is a completely different Coastal team. But to me, I think the under is the way to go in this game because I think that App State's offense could struggle without Zach Thomas, although I think that the Huseman kid has at least been in the system long enough to run it decently. And I think Coastal could find it a little difficult at times to move the ball in App State.
Good stuff, guys. They're in the Sun Belt. And we got AAC up next, a good one here. Number 7 ranked Cincinnati at UCF in Orlando, Florida. 343-344, the rotation number here, guys. 3:30 Eastern kick, nationally televised on ESPN. We got Cincinnati -5 in the hook right now. 64 being the total in the bounce house, mid-major Matt. Interested in your thoughts, man. I'll go after you, bro.
Well, I mean, look, one of my losses over the weekend was I thought UCF was going to crush Temple in terms of their points. I had the over for their point total, and they spent the fourth quarter essentially handing it off and basically didn't try and show anything. And look, the first quarter when they put up 21 points, I'm like, okay, this is UCF. And we all know what UCF is. They're a team that's really potent offensively, and they overcome their poor defense. And they have not been a home underdog the past 3 years. They haven't been a home underdog probably in quite a while, at least under all this recent success they've had. And the other thing that's going to come into play here is potentially Trey Nixon. I think they worked him out. It looked like he was going to play against Temple, and they decided, all right, we're going to get him ready for this Cincinnati game because this means a whole lot more to their season than the Temple game did. When you look at Cincinnati, I mean, last week was the perfect opportunity for them to potentially be looking ahead. And all they did was beat ECU's 55-17. Now, I think they were also pissed off. They gave up 42 points to them last year. So that's what kept them focused. Cincinnati's just a monster when it comes to against the spread. 21-13 against the spread. They played 22 unders, 11 overs, and 1 push in that span. And when the total's higher, they've gone under the total. 6 of their last 7 when it's 56.5 to 63 points. The one thing here, it's a bit of a concern is they've played one road game. They won that SMU game 42-13. Now, Rob talked about for the other games, it doesn't matter necessarily as much when there's not a crowd. The only thing that's good is UCF at least gets the home locker room and everything. And I know this is a bit of a broken record because we've had Cincinnati in my Every Game on the Board podcast. Desmond Ritter's doing a really nice job. And with an offense like this with Dokes and Ford, he doesn't have to do as much because he could just hand it off and they could play, defense with that defense. But to me, I'm still not a huge Desmond Ridder guy. I know his numbers look good. I know he's playing well right now, but can you trust Desmond Ridder in a huge game like this? I can't play UCF because their defense is so bad and Cincinnati could take advantage of it. But I just have to decide myself if I'm ready to lay those points with Cincinnati on the road. They're clearly the better team here, but is Desmond Ridder the type that's going to get me a win on the road and a cover against an offense that should be able to put up some points, I would think, in this one?
In mid-major, Matt, you speak to UCF's defense being, not that great. But what about the last two games here against Temple and Houston? It's not like they've gotten torched. Anything in terms of improvement on the defensive side for UCF?
Well, I mean, sadly, as a Temple fan, they're down to their 19th quarterback now, and their offense hasn't been the same, and they've had some injury issues. So they played well enough. I mean, Temple was using a true freshman at one point, and so of course he was going to struggle on the road. And the Houston game, I mean, for what you said, they still did give up 21 points. Now, 14 of those were in the second half, and only 7. But, I mean, Houston was without Marquez Stevenson, and that Houston offense without Marquez Stevenson is just, I mean, he's their game breaker. They get him the ball as much as possible, and they can't run it. So it doesn't matter who they're facing. Houston can't run it. So to me, those are two hollow results. They gave up 34 to Tulane. They gave up 34 to Tulsa. They gave up 28 to East Carolina. So to me, I can't, just because they've had some success these last two games, I'm not ready to say, ooh, UCF has a good defense. They're getting better. But they haven't faced a Cincinnati-type offense in a couple of weeks, I would say.
And in Tulsa, mid-major Matt, the last time UCF was a home dog against Tulsa in late November of 2016, they were catching 1 on the closing run.
And I wonder if they opened as a favorite and people, for some reason, just bet Tulsa. I don't know what the circumstances were for that, but I mean, that is quite a while. I mean, they've been really good, and it would normally be, I think this is a place where a home crowd would make a difference because I think UCF would come out better. I think there would be some nice atmosphere, but with no atmosphere, to me, you could play this game on the moon or you could play this game anywhere else, and it's just who's the better team.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, they're definitely hurt by the bounce house not being packed out because that place is, in my opinion, I mean, group of 5, it's probably the most difficult place to play. Actually, mid-major Matt, the last time UCF was even an underdog in the regular season, so an underdog to any non-SEC team here, was back in 2017 at Maryland, which they ended up winning 38-10. So this is kind of rarefied air here, Robbie, for UCF. I mean, catching points at home. Now it speaks it speaks volumes to the Cincinnati squad and how dominant they've been, how really talented they are under Luke Fickell.
Yeah, it's crazy, Drew. We knew that he was recruiting like crazy ever since he hit that campus, and it's starting to pay dividends. I mean, we see the progression with Cincinnati year by year to the point now where, they're right in that conversation for a New Year's 6 bowl bid. And, the competition there, I guess, would be BYU and potentially Marshall as a third horse in that race, but a longer shot. But the progression has been great for this team. Let me stick some numbers to Desmond Ridder here, guys, because, you have to agree with Matt that the guy has not proven throughout his career to be consistent. He's very, very streaky. When he's really good for a game, he's really good. And then usually he bounces back with a poor performance. But Desmond Ridder, the last 4 games, throwing the football and rushing the football, has been out of this world. Let me go to his passing numbers first, guys, which are the most eye-opening of all, because you would expect him to throw a clunker in a 4-game span somewhere along the line, but he is not. 75 of 105 for 886 yards, 4 touchdowns, and no interceptions. That for Desmond Ridder, that's outstanding for any quarterback, never mind just Desmond Ridder. Now go to his rushing numbers, 38 rush attempts over the last 4 games, 406 rushing yards, 10.7 a carry, 9 rushing touchdowns. So he's accounted for 13 TDs in the last 4 games, and he's done absolutely nothing wrong. 0 wrong. Against this UCF defense, and again, we talked about it last week, Drew, on this, it was on the Wednesday show, every game on the board, where we used UCF as a best bet. I think we may have caught that early enough in the week when it was bet down to 24 or 24.5 upon maybe Anthony Russo playing. It subsequently went up to 25 and half and into 29 at game time. But prior to that game, we talked about this defense. They had those 4 rests on the defensive side of the football 2 weeks ago. And they had to stick 4 brand new guys into that defense, and they go 40 minutes holding Houston scoreless or touchdownless. So that was, and I talked about after the game how they were all jacked up about how great they were against Houston. Marquez Stevenson, a big deal for UCF with 4 new defensive starters to hold Houston with no touchdowns for the first 40 minutes of the game, probably a bigger deal. They come back against Temple. As Matt said, you get Real Mitchell, pop gun arm, pretty good runner, not a great quarterback. And they hold Temple to 3 points before they pull everybody. And basically, I've never seen UCF guys under Josh Heupel. I really haven't seen them just give the fourth quarter up. Again, putting numbers to what Matt said, 19 offensive plays after they yanked Dylan Gabriel once they went up 38-3. 19 offensive plays, 17 rushes. And the 2 passes were on like 3rd and long, I think. So really, they didn't try to move the football after that. But I think it's going to be tough for their defense here. Even though they've played better, I would take Matt's point more than I would Central playing better in the fact that they've played 2 somewhat hobbled teams. Houston, even without Stevenson, they showed last week. They didn't have Stevenson last week, and they score like crazy. Because they made a point of it midweek to start out of the shoe early and score points. They did. But against this team, the way Ritter's playing, boy, oh boy, they're going to have to score. Let me say this. The 3 best offenses, not named UCF, inside that conference are Houston, SMU, and Memphis. And Cincinnati's defense has held all 3 to season lows. Houston gains 282 yards against Cincinnati's defense. SMU gains 290 yards against Cincy's defense. Memphis gains 321 against Cincinnati's defense. So I know UCF is better than all 3. They are, but how much more yardage are they worth here? They average 619 yards a game. So if I take 321, the best that's been put up against Cincinnati by an excellent offensive team inside that conference, what if I add 150 to it and say UCF is going to go for 471 against Cincinnati? I'm picking the high note here. I think that's the ceiling. With that in mind, I don't even think it's enough, guys, for UCF to cover the game because of the way Cincinnati's playing offensively right now. They have outscored opponents the last 4 weeks, 184-50. There's an explosiveness to this Cincinnati offense. Now, they have 12 touchdowns, 12 outside the red zone. So from the 20 out, they've scored 12 times in the last 4 games. That's not Cincinnati-like. Cincinnati-like is Woody Hayes football, 3 yards, cloud of dust, 3-yard line plunge for a touchdown. It's not the way it's happening for them right now. So with that bit of explosiveness, with that defense, I find it hard for Dylan Gabriel and company to score enough. There's only one way they can win the game, and that's outscore this team, which they're totally capable of. I just don't think it's going to happen here. I think there's going to be more drives where Cincinnati stops them than they have success on. And let me say this real quick. If, in fact, Cincinnati, with Central Florida's tempo, if, in fact, Cincinnati's able to get a few 3-and-outs and keep that UCF defense on the field because of 3-and-outs that take about 28 seconds, probably less, then UCF's defense is going to be in that much more trouble. Over 4 quarters, I think Cincinnati probably covers this game. UCF will have their moments, but I just don't think they can outscore them.
Robbie, I have a question for you. You brought up the guys that there was one of their players was driving around with, and he didn't have a license, and there was a gun in the car.
Right.
Are all 4 of the guys kicked off the team, or just the driver with the gun?
I think that Antoine Collier, the defensive back, is still fighting the legal battle, Drew. The only one that I think can get back for this game, if in fact he wins that legal battle. Now, the way legal battles go, They're so time consuming. I don't see any way he gets back before Saturday, but he is still trying to contest that, to try and get back on the field. I would say if we were going to rate them, probable, questionable, doubtful, or rate him in one of those categories, I would say doubtful. But he's a meaningful piece in the secondary for sure. I just don't think he'll be back for this game. That's all projection, Drew. What I know for a fact is that he's still contesting the legal battle.
And we also got to remember, this is a UCF team that had 10 guys opt out in their two deep before the season even started. So having 4 more now not available. I mean, this is just not the same UCF roster. You know what I mean? I mean, it's starting to be a lot of talent taken off of this. Guys, I have a question. I'm not sure if team totals are out. I'm not into betting, team totals early in the week here, but just going off of what the total is in the -5.5. If UCF's team total was pinned at 28.5, Robbie, would you bet the over or the under?
That's a real good question. I mean, generally speaking, they're not a field goal kicking team, but you're asking me to get to 31 against Cincinnati's defense. Possible. Boy, that would be tough for me, Drew. That's a good number. That would be really tough for me. I'll turn it over to Matt to see if he's got anything definitive on that, but that would be real tough for me.
That is the number. It is 28.5. And
wow.
I mean, it is. I mean, that's literally the perfect number because you'd need the 4 touchdowns. And as you said, they don't kick field goals. I mean, I won't play it. I would lean under. The Cincinnati's total is 33.5. I'd be more apt to take over there because they are relentless and it's not like UCF is all of a sudden going to find defense. That's the one I would lean more towards, but I'm running from that UCF total.
Man,
if there's a we mentioned Cincinnati in this mix for a New Year's Day 6 bowl game. If there's a game where they need to make a statement to get that bid, it's this game, right? It's the best opponent they'll play all season long. It's the one that will be most widely recognized by everybody. So for Cincinnati, even though it's a conference foe and it could come back to haunt them in the long run, they may just keep playing, Drew, in the fourth quarter, even with a lead. They may just keep on playing to try and show the folks who, give out these bowl invitations, or the folks that do the rankings, that they deserve it. So, when you only have one opponent like this on your schedule, you got to make the most of it. So that's something to keep in mind where Cincinnati's concerned in covering this number. And
by the way, Rob didn't really talk about it as much, but I mean, I would say, look, Coastal's got an outside shot at that G5 group because they do. I mean, it's Cincinnati, it's BYU, it's Coastal, it's Marshall, and I would say Liberty too. And remember, Coastal and Liberty are playing each other. So, Coastal's got another shot and Liberty's got another shot with NC State, and they could go 3-0 against the ACC. So there's really 5 schools, and Rob's right. I mean, Cincinnati, if they want to, they could put up their own score and be like, look, we're embarrassing this team and we should get consideration. So yeah, that's why another reason why I like the 33.5 over is because Cincinnati's got a score to make everybody realize how good they are.
And you're talking, style points here are going to matter for the Cincinnati side. And last question here to you, mid-major Matt, being involved in the UCF game last week, and it was, like Robbie talked about, obvious that they were just getting ready for Cincinnati, kind of running out the clock there at the end. So just kind of saving up for this matchup. Do you take anything away and not maybe downgrading them off of last week's performance?
I mean, they scored 21 points in the first quarter. I assume, I didn't look at the drive charts, but I'm assuming they had the ball 3 times in the first quarter and went down the field. And then, I mean, look, they could have scored 60 if they wanted to, but they just didn't want to. And they didn't want to give Cincinnati anything. As Cincinnati, with the fake punt, at least in the fourth quarter, gave UCF some things to worry about. No, I'm not going to downgrade him for last week. I think it's arguably it's a smart thing. It's not like UCF needs style points here. It's not like they're trying to impress anybody. Their season basically comes down to Saturday. So now I'm not going to really downgrade them. I just think they played it smart and said, okay, we're going to beat Temple. And if for some reason Temple scores a touchdown, it becomes 21 points. Maybe they put everybody back in. They score another quick touchdown, but they were never threatened last week.
Okay, so that will be a fun one. 3:30 on Saturday, guys. We got the Degenerate special here, last game on the board, and then we'll get best bets from around the horn. And guys, also remember, 3:00 Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. Mid-Major Matt, Rob Veno, and myself will be breaking down every single MAC game on tonight's slate and tomorrow's with a best bet as well. So come back and join us here, starting in just 20 minutes. But we do have the degenerate special here, guys. It's last game on the card, Saturday night. So it's always fun. Late night special here. Looks like, what do we got, guys? Did it get canceled? Don't tell me. No. All right. Boise State, Hawaii is still on the board.
For now.
Nobody worried too much. 11 p.m. Eastern kick, 8 p.m. Pacific. Boise State at Hawaii, 60 being the total here, mid-major Matt. 14 in the hook. That's the Broncos laying on the island.
For now, this game's not going to get postponed. Let me tell you. So, look, last week I doubted them, and I was looking to, and we did this on the Every Game on the Board podcast, and I wanted to fade Boise State, but I didn't because Bachmeier was the starting quarterback, and they came in, and look, their special teams won the game, and they win 52-21, and that somewhat erases the doubts. But here's the numbers behind that. Boise State was without 14 players due to COVID protocols. They barely met the Mountain West thresholds to play the game. They had 5 defensive linemen dressed. They had 10 offensive linemen dressed. And one of the offensive linemen actually switched over to defensive line and played a couple snaps. So, and listening to the coach, it doesn't sound like it's going to be that much better. And actually, Boise State's not traveling to Hawaii until Friday due to the rules that they put in place by the local officials, I'm guessing in Idaho. So they're going to get their final tests on Thursday. They're going to leave Friday morning. They're going to get the results, and then they're going to board the plane. So they're going to fly over on Friday and play this game. Now, look, I know obviously it's a late game, so the time difference won't be terrible, but it's still going to be a time difference. So to me, I don't like Boise State on from that side because offensive and defensive lines, especially against a team like Hawaii, who wants to run it so much and who wants to play that, with the go-go principles and everything like that. The problem with Hawaii is, look, there's 2 games where they look like the class of the Mountain West, and there's 2 games they look like UMass. I mean, the game against San Diego State, one of my wins last week was I took under 20.5 points for Hawaii to score in that game, and they got held to 10. And outside of the one drive, they couldn't do much against San Diego State. Now, look, Boise State's defense and San Diego State's defense aren't the same thing. Plus, Hawaii's played 3 of their first 4 on the road, so that's going to make a difference for a team like that. They spent those 2 weeks on the mainland when they had the opening 2 road games back-to-back. To me, right now, I'm thinking Hawaii plus the points and hoping that the good Hawaii shows up, because if you've got a Boise State team that's got 5 defensive linemen and one of those guys was an offensive lineman who switched over, and you've got the go-go and you've got the physical nature of a Hawaii team, you're going to wear that group down as much as you can. And heck, Hawaii could probably play faster if they wanted to. I may hold my nose. This is not going to be a play, most likely. This is degenerate special, so therefore it's going to be if you really need to. I think Hawaii's the play here at plus 14 or so. I think Hawaii, if we get the good Hawaii, they could win this game outright. If we get the mediocre Hawaii, they could cover the spread. If we get the UMass version of Hawaii, I look like an idiot and I won't be on the show next week. I mean, I won't be on the show anyway next week, but I think Hawaii's the side here.
Robbie, we haven't gotten the good Hawaii, for 2 straight weeks, 3 straight weeks, 3 losses in a row, but hopefully they'll show up on the island. What are you thinking here, degenerate special?
Well, I think if they play the game, I love the way this total is trending down, all the way down to 59 now, last I looked. And I would play over because partially to what Matt said about this Boise defense, it's not the same. It's just not the same defense. So I think that Hawaii, Todd Graham's a funny head coach to try and figure out here. He comes in, he's obviously a run-oriented spread guy. You got to divide these spread guys into 2 groups. Do they throw the ball all over the lot, or do they prefer to run it first and throw off of it? Todd Graham is that guy who likes to run first and throw off of it. In the game against New Mexico, where he knew he had a lousy pass defense, Chevin Cordero threw the football. They threw the football. I think they scored 4 TDs on pass plays of 40 yards or better. So they're going to I think the way to look at Todd Graham is he's going to take advantage of what the other team is weakest at. And I think Boise's a better run defense than they're a pass defense. So I'd look for Hawaii to throw the ball a little more. Both things will probably work, especially if, as Matt mentioned, there's coronavirus absences for the Boise State team and the game still gets played. But the other side of that coin is, Hawaii's come up pretty good defensively in a couple of spots where total yardage looks like they're pretty good, but they're really not that good. I mean, last week, San Diego State only gets 15 first downs, but they gained 326 yards on the ground. Boise is so balanced offensively, and with Bachmeier at quarterback in his second week now, back from the shoulder injury, you have to believe that they're going to move the football against Hawaii. To me, this number of 59 speaks to the early money believing that Boise's going to be so depleted roster-wise that you just bet under the number. But I don't know that I see it that way if the game gets played. If the game gets played, I think Boise scores. I think Hawaii gets to, both these sides could get to 34-35 here, Drew, in my estimation. So probably at this point in time, because if the game gets played, I think the total goes back up. At this point in time, I think you take advantage of the 59 that's out there. 31-28 pushes your ticket. You have to get better than that. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't get better than that in this game. And God forbid, Boise has to chase in this game and throw the football even more. Better for total bettors. So to me, it would be over the number right now. As Matt said, maybe there's a possibility it doesn't get played, but if it does, I think I'd look over 59.
All right, maybe looking towards the over in that one. I don't know. I think this one's real tough. I mean, mid-major, Matt, I have a question for you in terms of teams traveling to Hawaii. You may not know. Do they all leave on Friday, or would sometimes they leave on Thursday?
I'm guessing it's up to the state's coronavirus protocols. According to the article I read, it was an Idaho thing. So maybe if it's a different state, I mean, look, Hawaii's been really careful during this whole thing, and I'm surprised that they're even allowing teams to come and play, but they figure, I guess, the later and maybe it's the state of Hawaii too, who said, look, you can come, but you got to come the day before. I mean, we'd have to read the article. I forget who the home team was for Hawaii and see when they traveled in a couple weeks ago. But I think this is more of either Idaho or a Hawaii thing where they said, look, you're spending the least amount of time in this state as possible. And look, with a team that's got so much COVID as it is, they're going to want to rely on that late test. So we're not going to know anything about the status until Friday afternoon, I'd say. And like Rob said, I think your best bet's probably that this game's not getting played. But he's right also in the over. But I'll take a chance that the good Hawaii shows up, especially if over. There's some 14.5s right now. I think that hook's important here. And I think that you could look for a nice little, hell, if you're really a degenerate, take Rob's over, take the 14.5, and there you go.
And we're not recommending parlays here.
We are not. No, heaven forbid.
Hey, Drew, real quick, when Hawaii came on the road to play Fresno State for their opener, they stayed here for their next game against Wyoming, which was really a pretty good handicapping deal. They got thrown out of their general procedure that they would go through during the week, but they stayed in the States, played Wyoming, got crushed. Good defenses have stopped them, Wyoming and San Diego State, so far this season. So I just don't think Boise fits into that category. But as far as the state protocols go, as Matt said, they're all different. I mean, look at what's happened to New Mexico, right? New Mexico is not even allowed back in Albuquerque. They play, stay in Nevada, play in Nevada. So everybody's different.
All right, so here you go, Drew. I'm looking right now, so give me 1 second. All right, so the Lobos, New Mexico flew into Honolulu Friday morning to play the game, and then after that, they literally left. Like right after the game ended, I'm reading an article here from the Hawaii Tribune. So I'm guessing it's a Hawaii thing. I'm guessing it's a you come in, you leave type of situation. So something to consider for something. But I mean, with it being a later game, a later kickoff, if this was a 3:00 Eastern kickoff, that would be different. But it's an 11 o'clock. I don't know what the difference is in Hawaii time, but that will mitigate things a little bit.
Okay. I believe it's 6 hours behind Eastern. I could be wrong on that. And I don't know. My final thoughts, guys. I think there's too much going each way. Like mid-major Matt said, travel issues for Boise State, and then Hawaii not particularly looking good at home. I'm struggling with this. I'll take a flyer on the USC-Utah degenerate just 30 minutes before as well. And I like Utah at home plus the points in the other degenerate special. So that's the way I would lean you if you need the degenerate type of angle. But guys, let's get best bets out of the way here. And I feel good about mine. And then we got Maction coming up at 3:00 Eastern. So come back and join us. Every game on the Mac board. We're ready to rock in that one. So excited about that. Guys, I'll start us off here with UCF Cincinnati. We talked about it in depth. It is in the bounce house, and 63.5 is still the total. I think UCF gets theirs, goes for at least 28 points. You know, they're not going to kick field goals. They've proven in the past they're going to go for it on 4th down, which I think really helps overs bettors. I think the offense at least gets a couple breaks here with Dylan Gabriel throwing it around to some talented receivers and the fastest up-tempo offense in the country. We saw them save some last week. I think they're saving, a couple of trick plays here, being the first time they're a home underdog since about 4 full years ago. So it's been quite a while since UCF's been in this role. Cincinnati's offense has woken up as well. Yes, their defense is good, but I think their offense really takes it to a UCF defense, like Mid-Major Matt talked about earlier, is really just struggling. And like Rob Veno brought up earlier, 4 guys off of the defense, add in the 10 from before the season even started. Their defense is just depleted here. I think Cincinnati put some points up as well. So I like Cincinnati sidewise, but for the best bet, I like over 63.5 in Cincinnati versus UCF. So we got Robbie Veno on Twitter at Rob Veno Sports. What do you got for best bets, bud?
Yeah, I'll play a total as well, Drew, but I'll play the Coastal Carolina Appalachian State game under the 48. The game's going to really, the burden of this game for App State is going to be placed upon their defense. And I think there's only one time this season where they've allowed more than 17 points. Maybe there's 2. I think it was 1, though, where they've allowed over 17 points. I don't think they've allowed over 21 in a game all season long. So the defense will come prepared. And the offense, I think, as you mentioned earlier, Drew, it's been so sporadic. There's been a couple of games here where App State has actually gained over 500 yards, but couldn't make it to the 40-point mark. Score like 31 on 500-plus yards, 38 on 500-plus yards. Hasn't been the same offense, really, as far as scoreboard productivity is concerned, and that's with Zach Thomas. Without Zach Thomas, against this Coastal Carolina defense, Jamie Chadwell is just a great motivator, and his squad believes. So I think that defense will keep App State quiet, especially if App State has to lean on the running game. Both sides probably lean on the running game here and get contained, if not shut down. I'll take under 48 in that contest. Big game. Maybe they come out and play it close to the vest for the first half. So I'll take under 48.
I like it, Rob. Yeah, both teams close to the vest there in the Sun Belt. Under 48. I got Cincinnati UCF over 63.5. Also, shout out to the chat box saying Cincinnati's going to score till the last second. That is true. They are the favorite, and if they run out to the lead, they're not going to put their pull off of any scoring opportunities. So that's something to have in our back pocket as well. We got Robbie Veno in with his best bet, the Coastal Carolina app under 48. He's the number 1 handicapper, guys, at WagerTalk, sportsmemo.com. Out of all the handicappers, you're looking for the number 1 in terms of profit produced. It is Robbie Veno. We also got Mid-Major Matt, 27-14 this season in college football team totals. He's really seeing that well. Team totals. So check him out. And also NFL totals, team totals, 9-4. So not as much volume, but on a little run there in the professional football ranks as well, Mid-Major Matt. So congrats to you on that. What do you got for best bets, bud?
All right, so my number's not going to be on the board until Saturday morning. That's just the way I am. I am going to play the first half for BYU if it's 28 or under against North Alabama. BYU's hosting North Alabama of the FCS level. And to me, BYU's coming off a bye week. They don't play next week. They don't play again until, December 12th against San Diego State. So they're going to have full focus here. The Zach Wilson Heisman hype has to continue to me. So I don't think North Alabama presents much of an issue for BYU. This is a team that scored a ton of points in the first half so far this season. So to me, anything around 28 or under for BYU's first half. I think BYU steamrolls North Alabama. Remember, they got to play style points too, even if it's against an FCS school. And they're playing for Zach Wilson going to New York for the Heisman. So to me, anything at 28 or under for BYU's first half against North Alabama, they're going to steamroll those guys. And they're going to do it early and when they're fully focused.
All right, for Mid-Major Matt, Rob Veno, I am Drew Martin. Shout out to the chat box, Paco, Nutflush Allen, Johnny Outlaw, Carolina Tar Heel, Lomar Swede, all you guys. Welcome in, and thanks for chiming in. We'll be right back in 5 minutes on the WagerTalk YouTube channel here, guys, with Maction, every game on the board. So